The battle for the mind of North America will be fought in the video arena.
Lawrence, are you ready to go? Yeah? Okay. We're gonna get started. However, I wanted to make sure we started this right. Our organization is not a Christian organization, but I am, and everything we do has to be in line with God. And with that, I want to start this event with a prayer. Lawrence, if you can come in.
Good afternoon. Let's pray together. Sovereign God, we thank you for this moment we can gather together as people in this democracy that we live in. We thank you for this province, for this nation that we are part of. It was set up with the foundation of you and your word, and we proclaim that in this moment and pray that it would continue on. I pray, Lord, for this proceeding that you gave Nadine great wisdom as she speaks. We pray for protection over this place in this moment as well, and just pray in the name of Jesus, Lord, that you would not just protect us, but that you would guide us and continue to keep this land glorious, strong, and free. We give this to you now and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit the flow of the afternoon. And you're going to notice here there's a QR code on the screen. I know some of us don't really feel that great about QR codes. But anyways, if you use your phone and you use that QR code, it's going to get you to our website where you can submit comments, questions, concerns. We want to respect everyone who's come here today, and we want to respect their time. So this is how we're going to hear from you if you have questions throughout the presentation. So we ask that you don't interrupt or scream, but you guys all look like you're pretty good, honest people, that you're not going to do that. But we have had messages of threats that this presentation was going to be disrupted. So in order to avoid that or avoid possible plants, we've seen that happen before. Well, they'll plant someone to say something crazy and then paint us all as that. So in order to protect the mission that we have, our organization, as well as each and every one of you, we've decided to do it this way. Now, it's not that we don't want to hear from you. It does ask for an email address. You don't even need to put a good one. And it asks for your name. You can put anonymous if you want. But any questions, concerns, or comments, you just go to that and it's going to send it to our website. Now, what's going to happen, I'm going to do a bit of a presentation, maybe about 30 minutes. I'll try to stick to the time, but I'm very chatty, so I can't make any promises. And then we'll do a little break, and then I'm going to come back and talk about the most important part of this presentation, and that's why we're going to take a break, because I want you to be focused and fresh and ready to take in what we're going to talk about after the break. Before is important too, but not as important as that, and you'll see why when we get to it. And then we're going to take another break, and then Mitch Sylvestre, who's from Alberta Prosperity Project, he's graced us with his presence today, and he's going to talk about what's happening in Alberta, and maybe we're going to learn a thing or two from him as to what we can do here in Saskatchewan. So does that sound good? If you have questions, just use the QR code. So who we are. Unified Grassroots is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. And what I mean by nonpartisan, we have conservative values, we have specific values, but we will not tell you who to vote for. So we will teach you where there's certain things you can do to have a greater influence, but at the same time, you can do the same thing in every single political party in Saskatchewan. So right now, we might mention some parties. In 10 years from now, it might be a completely different party. The same thing we're going to teach you today will apply then. It's going to be a really important democratic education. How many of you were at our previous town halls last year? Okay, so not as many, so which is good, because what you're going to learn today, some of it might be a repeat, but most of it will be brand new information for most of you. So on the screen, we started in a time that was very difficult for everyone on either side during COVID. If you look at the middle picture there, that was our very first event. So I'm not going to do a whole history about our organization. I'll just explain to you how I became in this position, for good or for bad. We were supposed to meet a few parents at my house, my husband and I, who's a doctor. We were going to talk about some of the harm that was happening to our children with some of the mandates. Not everyone's on the same page, and that's fine. But it was affecting our daughter more specifically, and we wanted to talk about it. So we decided to have a meeting at our house. We thought there was going to be 5 parents. I started a Facebook group because I live in the middle of nowhere, and Google Pin doesn't get you to my house. So the Facebook group was private. Overnight, we had 850 parents, just word of mouth, join that Facebook group overnight. And then within 3 days, it was 2,500. In Prairie Spirit School Division, there's only about 10,000 parents. So this is not like a normal phenomenon. The only thing that could explain this was there was something greater happening. And from there, our organization grew and grew. We grew to 10,000 within a matter of a month. And then once all that was kind of over with, we moved into talking about other things you're not supposed to talk about, which is what was happening in our schools. And then we started pushing for the parental rights legislation that was passed in Saskatchewan. We started pushing for other conservative things in the province. Now our group is now at over 80,000 members, most of them, the majority of them, probably 90% in Saskatchewan. Now the thing is, we can't always reach them. You make a post, maybe a small percentage answer, but for the most part, we have over 80,000. We did poll our members, and we asked them, if Carney wins the next election, where do you see yourself? What do you want? 90% of our members said they wanted Saskatchewan to separate. So a big percentage of them said that they wanted Saskatchewan to become the 51st state or part of the 51st state. Only 10% of them said they wanted Saskatchewan to stay within Canada. So when the election occurred, maybe a month later, we decided as a board to start moving on this. Not because we feel we're the best to move on this or the most equipped, but we almost felt a duty because we had such a big membership already in Saskatchewan. We felt we might be able to reach more people quicker in order to influence more change. So with that, these are some of the values that we have. We hold government accountable, liberty and personal freedom, informed consent, patient-focused healthcare. I'm reading them. Can you guys read that in the back, or is it too small? It's good? Okay, good. Funding students, not system, that goes along with parental rights, low and fair taxes, unleashing Canadian energy and resources, preserving Canadian culture through sustainable immigration, which is something we're going to talk, both Mitch and I, later on today, protecting Saskatchewan's sovereignty.
For a long time, we've been talking about trying to separate from Canada. Now we're seeing that out in Alberta. For the people in Alberta who want to separate, do you have any tips for them on how to actually get the
Our success so far, it does not place me in a position to give them tips about what to do, but I could give them tips about what not to do. Not now. The first idea is to define oneself as a nation. Therefore, it requires a culture of their own. And I am not certain that oil and gas qualify to define a culture. But it's theirs to decide if they want to vindicate the right to self-determination. I would never interfere in that. It belongs to them. I would like us to be the first to do so.
Is François Legault, which is the Bloc Québécois leader, so he leads kind of the separatist movement in Quebec. A reporter asked him, for the people in Alberta that want to separate, do you have advice to give? And he says, well, if you follow my advice, you won't succeed because we haven't really been successful. But he said, if there's one piece of advice is you need to define yourself, define your culture. And I don't think oil and gas cuts it. So, which some people were insulted by that, but I thought it was really good advice, because if we're going to lead a movement that says we're not being represented, well, what is it that we're trying to represent? So I'm going to go through a few slides really quickly as to what Saskatchewan is. And I got a preface. I was born and raised here, and I'm going to give you a bit of information about me, just so you know where I'm coming from when I'm presenting this information. I was raised in the East Coast. So in New Brunswick, to be more exactly. I was raised As a lefty, I voted left almost all of my life until 2016. I actually voted for Trudeau the first time around. And I know, some will be really upset. But I'm telling you this because this is when I was completely brainwashed by the media. And I know you guys are here, and you might disagree with me on this, but I was. I listened to everything they said. I wasn't super informed on politics. And I basically believed that Harper was really bad and he was cold and didn't care about anyone. Now I realize I've been lied to and I've been misled. And there's one thing I don't like is when I'm being lied to and misled. So one of the things that actually started waking me up is when Trudeau announced his 50% cabinet. I'm like, wait a minute, there's not 50% women in government. It's a much smaller percentage. I want people in government who are there because they're qualified for the position, not because of the gender that they have. So that was like the first thing. As soon as he got elected, I felt regret. And then that kind of waking up from reality kind of started happening slowly. And then I met my husband, who's like as conservative as they come. He's standing in the back there. So when I'd say, oh, I think Obama's really great, he'd be like, what? And then he would teach me some of the policies that Obama had passed and some of the negative effect it had on the people. And I started realizing I'm not really super informed. And then Trump was another example of that. I hated the guy. I had TDS. Like, I will fully admit I have full deranged TDS, and some of you probably still do. I'm not saying he's an angel. But the thing is, I noticed that they were manipulating almost everything he said. And that was another source of waking up, when they would say that he's racist and he called all the Mexican coyotes and stuff like that. When you actually look at what he said, he was talking about a specific group of people who are human trafficking people. So just things like that. Anyways, I'm saying this because I know the mindset of the East. I used to have it. So everything they say Ottawa stands for, which I'm going to talk about, I used to believe. I have had this awakening as to how we fix this country. And it's not with the mindset I used to have. It sounds great, that mindset. But in reality, what comes from it is actually more damaging than what they're saying they're trying to do. So that's what I'm giving you guys an introduction to that so you understand where I'm getting this information. I've lived it. Okay, Saskatchewan identity. So this is some of the stuff that I've realized since I moved here. I've been here since 2009. So I've been here a little while. We have deep agricultural roots. I'm now a farmer, married to a farmer / doctor. He just became a doctor so he could farm, afford to farm. So Saskatchewan is the breadbasket of Canada. We have settlers' grit, resilience, hard work community. When you learn about how Saskatchewan and Alberta has been built, it's a pretty fascinating story of how resilient the people are. And it's still to our core who we are. We're mostly rural and small town lifestyle. We have wide open prairies and big sky, connection to season and natural rhythm, although I'm still not quite connected to the winters in Saskatchewan. When you see those sundogs, you know what it means. It's extremely cold, and I still haven't figured out how to be happy with that cold. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Use a QR code. No, I'm kidding. Okay, Indigenous and Matei influence. There's a strong presence of First Nations and Matei communities in Saskatchewan. There's a rich tradition in language, arts, and spirituality, historical treaties, and cultural revival. I will be talking a bit more about this later on in the presentation because it's one of the talking points that we're seeing come up a lot in counter to the narrative of sovereignty. Political culture, regional independence, and Western alienation. When I met my husband, I got introduced to this very, very deep seated root in him. He was 14 years old when he joined this independence group in Alberta. So he grew up on a farm in Alberta. I don't remember what it's called, but I'm sure he could tell it. Mix of prairie populism and conservatives. Political innovators from Tommy Douglas, and I know that's not on the conservative side, but to modern movements like ours. Cultural expression, we're just going to skip that, but a lot of people immigrated to Saskatchewan to escape persecution. They came here for freedom. So it's one of the core things that we have in this province. Faith and family values. The majority of Saskatchewan residents do say that they believe in God. The majority of Saskatchewan residents are Christians, not all of them, but a big percentage of them. Family-oriented communities and large household Hutterite colonies, which I invited today, but I don't think they've been able to come because they're still seating. Work ethics and sports, it doesn't really go together, or maybe it does, but I was trying to skip to less slides. Strong blue-collar values, farming, trade, oil, work hard, play hard. This part I will never fully understand, the obsession for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I used to live in North Battleford, and there's a house, I kid you not, that's painted in Rough Rider colors in North Battleford. And I worked at Service Canada for a little bit, and they had a parade. I guess they won some tournament, and everyone in town was dressed in green. And this was like shortly after I just moved here. So I'm sure this is one of the questions and concern people have when we talk about sovereignty. What's going to happen to the Saskatchewan Roughriders? So we do want to include it in the conversation. Resource stewardship, economy driven by oil, gas, potash, uraniums, and more. Tradition of hunting, fishing, respecting the land, balance between development and conservation. So this goes with firearms rights. It goes with a lot of the reason we're not happy with some of the stuff that's happened in Ottawa. Okay, again, this is the QR code. It's going to be on most of the slides. If there's things that I missed on there that you think is a core identity of who we are, we want to know, because we want to start doing marketing materials so that we can help Saskatchewan define themselves. So when people say, why are you so different? What is different than Ottawa? What is different than the rest of Canada that makes you want to be more of a sovereign nation? We want to be able to provide them with an easy, this is why. So if you have ideas that I didn't include, use the QR code. Why we clash. Again, I used to be pretty much everything. On the left, yeah, it's on the left. Government is the answer. That's how the East think a lot of the time. Government is the problem. That's how we think mostly in the West. Taxes are duty. Taxes are a burden. Trust. You can cheer for that, because they are. And we have way too much. I was going to bring a prop. I have a T-shirt. It's like a large sleeping T-shirt my father-in-law gave me, and he's also a separatist. But it said a quote about someone about the taxes are the price we pay for civil society. Somebody might know the quote. But in there, Tax Freedom Day was January 16th, I believe, when that quote was said. Tax Freedom Day now is in June. It might even be going into July. And what that means is from the day you start working January 1st to June, let's say 16th, I don't know the exact date, I should have Googled it. But from the day you work, from January 1st to June 16th, everything you do goes to the government. You're only free after that day. So it's a very big difference of how it was 50, 60, 75 years ago. Trust in bureaucracy, trust in people. Risk aversion, risk as growth. Safety before freedom, freedom before safety. National unity by force, unity through respect. Ottawa knows best. Locals know best. Policy, woo! Feel free to cheer. You don't need to use a QR code for that. Policy shapes lives. People shape their own lives. Yes. Progress through policy. Progress through production. Ask permission first. Fix the problem first. And delegation to experts or do-it-yourself instinct. Regulate to control outcome. Regulate only what's broken. If you want to answer that, that's fine. We'll just wait here. No, I'm kidding. I don't even know where it's ringing. For all I know, it could be my phone. Okay, why are we upset? Oh. Or maybe it's a counter-protester. No, I'm kidding. Why are we upset? I'm not going to go into a bunch of details on this. We will eventually provide you with a lot of things. Again, we're trying not to bombard you with too many things. But these are some of the reasons. If I'm missing any, that QR code is in the corner, add them. Because I want to know every single thing that makes you upset on how we've been treated by Ottawa. So Senate imbalance, we don't have good representation in Senate. We also don't have an electable Senate. So it's usually appointed by, most of the time, the Liberals. Rigged voting system. And I'm not saying this election was rigged. I'm not saying that, but I have questions. I'm just saying media is here. And I didn't bring my tinfoil hat like I put on my show when I talk about things like this. But there is something to the system that is rigged. When you don't have fair representation in media, when you have games that are played like they did at the Polyev riding where they had a meter-long ballot, when you have foreign interference and we still don't know the names of who was interfered with, there is something wrong with our election system and there needs to be massive reform done. Cabinet exclusion, a lot of the time there's no representation from the West in the government cabinet, especially when it's liberal. Costly language loss. I will tell you guys, English is my second language. So if I pronounce things a bit different sometimes, I was raised in a French household. I went to French school. I went to French universities. People don't understand how the system is rigged against the West because of these rules in bureaucracy and in government. When I moved out West, they asked me, which one are you better at? I'm like, I don't know. Okay, we're going to test you both. I grew up in a French home. We didn't learn English till grade 6. I did both tests. I exempted all English, and on the French, I did BBC. So if you know what that means, it's not good enough that I have to be retested every couple years. And I grew up in a French home, went to French school, went to French university. The tests are not the same. So if you speak English, I know how hard it is, because I grew up French and I still had a hard time with the test. So what does that mean? Most of the bureaucracy, they demand bilingualism. So a lot of the government that's not elected is bilingual, which means mostly in Quebec, mostly in New Brunswick. A lot of the government jobs go to the East Coast. So you end up having a government structure that's most representation of the East. Now, I'll give you another example. Canada Post. If you have a Canada Post in some small town, Saskatchewan, where no one speaks French, they still have to offer bilingual service, which means they'll advertise the position to Quebec and New Brunswick for somebody to move to Saskatchewan to be able to fill that position. Now, that also happens with leadership races. It also happens with MP. We do elect English-speaking MP, but we know that this is one of the requirements that affects representation. We don't have a big French-speaking population. There's a lady here today, we were speaking French, but we're probably, how many here speak French in this room? Okay, way more than I thought. We're about 2%. So yeah, that would fit the numbers, but it does affect government. Okay, I'm talking too much on one point. I'm going to try to go faster. Wealth sent to the east, unfair transfer payment, we all know this, pipelines blocked, Bill C-69, forced carbon tax, energy sector strangled, emissions cap, climate rules that hurt us, urban bias policy. There's not a lot of the representation in the East Coast are urban. Most of the population is urban. So when you have a government that's mostly urban, they cater policy, Canadian policy to urban. And the rural areas get kind of forgotten in that. Weak justice response, that's a big problem. Courts override Saskatchewan law, generations of alienation, resource control fights, no say in trade tax. That's a big one in Saskatchewan right now because Ottawa decided to put an EV, electric vehicle tax on China 100%, and they retaliated by doing 100% tariff on canola fields. Just to give you an example of the cost, it doesn't even make sense because the EV vehicle that they were trying to protect was about $16 billion. The cost of the Saskatchewan loss that we're going to have, or Alberta, just canola in general. I should have written the number. It's something 44 billion. So 43 point something. So they sacrificed 43 billion of the West to save 16, I think it was, of the East. Media, if you're trying to fact check me, feel free. I'm not sure if that number is 100% accurate. But I know we took a loss of 43 point something billions. Federal fertilizer reduction program, that's one of the ones that they're trying to push. Steps in the right direction. Okay, before I talk about this, I'm going to say a phenomenon that I've noticed that's very different with the right than the left. And I'm going to explain how the left works. The left will go to a politician with a list of 10 things to get them to do. And the politician, even if they're conservative, they're going to look at that list and say, I can't do 9 of these, but I'll do 1. And then they'll do that one, and then the left will celebrate him, they'll send him a bunch of donations, and then they'll go back and ask, can you do the second thing on the list? Now, we on the right will go to a politician with 10 things on that list, and they'll do 9 of them, but we won't stop talking about the one thing on that list that they didn't do. And you guys are all shaking your head because you've probably done it. I have done it too. But this is something we need to recognize. If we want politicians to go in the right direction, we need to support them when they're doing the right thing. Even if they did a million other things that aren't great, they are still our elected officials, and they are up against a narrative that's being pushed by nonprofit organization, by media, and they're kind of standing there on their own. They don't get the media narrative pushing them. They get us. So if we're always complaining about the one thing they didn't do, then they don't get any support in the public square, and then they keep moving left and left and left. So I'm going to talk about the few things they've done that are in the right direction. It doesn't mean it's a glowing endorsement, because I'm also going to talk about the things that they're not doing. So white paper, how many here have seen the white paper? Okay, so 2 hands. This should have been all over mainstream media for months and months and months. It was, and I didn't even know about it till 2 days ago. And I'm one of the bigger conservative voices in Saskatchewan. You think they would have sent it to me and say, hey, Nadine, look at all this wonderful work we've done towards sovereignty, or research towards it. So what it is was a report that was done and published, and it showed how Saskatchewan was going to face $111 billion loss by 2035 because of the policies that they've enacted. But it also gave recommendation, and some of these you've probably seen them pass. Provincial legislation to assert resource rights, seek immigration powers similar to Quebec, develop carbon credit markets to protect industry, consider collecting federal taxes provincially, prepare for legal and legislative access on electricity emission and fertilizer use, and act like Quebec. I understand, like, this information, like, super dry. So it's probably going to pass over some of your head. But when people ask you, why are you wanting sovereignty, point them to this paper. Say, hey, have you heard about the white paper? It showed that Saskatchewan was going to lose $111 billion in revenue. That goes towards hospital, because they care about hospital, right? They care about schools. That's money that's not going to go to schools, money that's not going to go to programs like social services, which are all programs that the left very much cares about. And I know I'm trying to use not left and right. I'm going to use rural and city. That's a better representation. So they passed the Saskatchewan First Act, which asserts exclusive jurisdiction, Section 92 of the Constitutional Act. So this is some of the things to protect their natural resources. The Sask Revenue Agency Act, it's not yet in effect, but it's to collect our own taxes so that Ottawa's not the one collecting it. I'd be okay with Alberta, but with Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan Firearms Act, basically, it's kind of taken the power away from the government to be able to seize, in a roundabout way, your guns. So they have to approve the person who does it. So they might just not get approved. And then Alberta has done some good stuff too, but I'm going to leave it for you. I don't know if you're going to cover it, maybe. It steps in the right direction. It's not everything we would like, but it steps in the right direction. And just recently, this is a more recent one, The NDP was trying to pass legislation because of us, to try to stop us from being able to gather the people, to try to take your voice away, to make it so a referendum couldn't be called by government. I know why, because they're afraid, and they have good reasons to be afraid because of what I'm going to present later on in the presentation, because I'm going to teach you how we can make it happen. And they tried to limit the amount of signatures or increase the signatures we needed for a plebiscite, which I'm going to go into shortly. Could they do more? Yes. Again, these are some of the things suggestion we have. We don't expect to know everything. Some of you might have your own suggestions. We want to hear them. We want to know what you want us to fight for. So assert jurisdiction, which, again, my French is coming out with pronunciation. Create parallel system. Reject federal overreach. Strengthen local trades. Host sovereignty summit. This is wonderful. If the government was to hold this, it would hold more credibility in the public than a nonprofit organization does. Draft a provincial constitution, push for referendums, which is something I wish they would do, and educate citizens more on the things that we are facing. Kind of like the white paper. I will be very critical of the Sask government on this, and specifically the Sask party. They really suck at communication. Sorry if that's a bad word. I should have known about the white paper. You all should have known about the white paper. There's so many things that they do that we never hear about because they don't have a strong communication team. But maybe that's something when you contact your MLA, let them know. If we have several thousands of people saying, hey, you need to get a better communications team, maybe they'll start learning that they need to I've told them, but they don't really listen to me. Some of the time they do. But, okay, what is coming? I'm not going to go super detailed into this. Mark Carney's vision for Canada. I was not a separatist. My husband was. Oh, he's not even there anymore. But I was not a full-blown separatist until this last election. I know what Carney's vision for Canada is. I know how extreme he is, and I know what's coming for Canada. The reason I'm a separatist is not because I've lost hope in the government. I never had really that hope. But I've lost hope in Canadians to be informed as to what they're actually voting for. So if all of these Canadians, after the last 10 years we've had, and all the suffering we've gone through, say we want more of that, that made me lose hope in Canadians. So, and Mark Carney's the reason for that. If you know anything about him, you will know what he wants Canada to become. So these are some of the examples. I'm trying to not spend too much time on it, but he wants government-led economy, global climate mandates. That means our resource sector will get destroyed. Redefining values, so prioritizing collective goals over individual freedoms. Digital currencies, which I will just be fully honest, I probably will not qualify for. I will be the first one to be vetoed and not have a good social credit system. Stakeholder capitalism. So basically this is societal agenda will be controlling all of the industries. Erosion of local economy, autonomy, threat to personal freedom, economic control, and loss of sovereignty. If you haven't read Mark Carney's book, I highly recommend you do. It's a really dry read. I've done a few first chapter and I'm like, I wanted to scratch my eyes out. And then I put it in AI and I got AI to give me the summary. Okay. He's not just a member of the World Economic Forum, he was a board member, so he was determining which direction that organization was going. Who here doesn't know what the World Economic Forum is? Okay, good. You guys are all really smart people. Everyone here knew. Okay, he was also a part of the UN Special Envoy, and his whole fight was fighting climate action. So again, he wasn't just a member. He was leading the way in all of these things. What can you do? So, have you read Corey Morgan's book, The Sovereigns Handbook? Okay, that's another book. If I get you to read anything, don't read Mark Carney. We already know he's bad news. But read this book. So this book, and I'm almost 3/4 of the way through, is some of the best information. I wish I had read this book 4 years ago when I started Unified Grassroots, because all of the mistakes he lays out in there I've done. But and learned from. But this is some of the things he suggests. Things to do: build up from the ground up. So if you think UG's going to do everything and we're going to take the lead and you don't need to do anything, it's going to fail. It can't be a leader telling you all what to do. It has to be a leader saying, hey, we'll give you a place to gather. We'll give you a place to send everyone when we're ready to go. But you have to go lead the people in your own community. And that's what we're going to try to encourage later. Engage respectfully. Listen to others' concerns and address them thoughtfully, which sometimes is hard to do. But you get a lot more with honey than you do with vinegar, and that's one of the things that I've learned, even though I'm still learning about not being so critical of mainstream media, but I'm learning. Honey works better than vinegar. But there's another: engage respectfully. There are people who are only coming on the sovereignty train now. Just because you were in it 10, 20, 30 years ago doesn't mean you should be shaming those people for not realizing sooner that things needed to change in that level. So I've already faced that. But instead of celebrating, we're doing something about it. So that's something to recognize in your area, in your communities. You'll have people that you might be the one to convince them. Don't make them feel bad for not realizing sooner. Educate yourself. Understand the arguments for and against to discuss them effectively. I'm still learning this. Stay consistent. Maintain a clear and steady message to build credibility. Doesn't mean you'll know everything. It's okay to say, I don't know. And you probably will ask me some question, and I'll say, I don't know. I don't claim to know everything about sovereignty. I don't claim to know everything about everything. In fact, I don't know everything about anything. So I don't even know why I'm here. No, I'm kidding. I do know why I'm here. I have a set of core values that can't be shaken. So collaborate. Work with like-minded individuals and groups to strengthen the movement. This is something I've failed at times to do. So, and when there's infighting and catfighting, I say catfighting because it's like straying cats sometimes in movements. And I'm one of those cats too. But collaborate. Long-term vision. Treat independence as a marathon, not a sprint, requiring persistent strategic effort. If we were to do the referendum tomorrow, we would fail. And we kind of all know that, probably based on the numbers if you ask people. So this is something that's going to take a long time with a lot of work and effort to get to the point. We're not like Alberta. Alberta's much further ahead than us, but we might be a little bit. But we don't have the organizational structure that they've been building for the last 4 years. These are don'ts. Don't rely on political parties. Avoid depending entirely on political party entities. I've made that mistake before. I've gotten too political or too involved when I should have stayed nonpartisan and just focused on the organization. That's a mistake I made. I was led astray and I followed like a stray cat. Dismiss concerns. Don't ignore or belittle the fears and questions of those hesitant about independence. So if there's people here who really don't want it, we want to know why. What are your fears? What are your concerns? Maybe it's just a misunderstanding that you don't know. So we want to know all of that. Engage in infight. Don't engage. It says engage in infighting. I did mistake there. It's supposed to be don't. Well, I guess it's don't. Don't engage in infighting. Don't neglect outreach. If you think you don't need to talk to people about it, we'll never get there. You need to talk to everyone you know. Your hairdresser, Clark, shares, he's part of our board here. No, he tells me all the people he's talked to, and it turns out they're independence-minded. And sometimes it's just one conversation that will completely change the narrative. For me, it was my husband. Assume inevitably Avoid thinking that independence will happen without sustained efforts. If you think you can stay on the couch and it's just going to happen, you don't need to do anything, it's not going to happen. Don't push to rush the vote. Okay. Referendum, plebiscite. How much time am I? Okay. Soon. In Saskatchewan, we don't have what Alberta has. I'm going to do the Coles note, really quick explanation. The only way we can have a referendum is if the government initiates it. So at this point, if the SAS party decides we're going to do it, that's binding. Do we have something we can do as citizens? Yes, but it's non-binding. And what that is a plebiscite. It's similar to a referendum. It's a question that's put to vote to the public, but the government doesn't need to act on it. What we want to do is try to influence change to make a signature-led or citizen-led petition for a referendum. That's going to need legislative change. So we're going to have to ask, demand, and potentially force, and I'm not talking violence, democratically, the government to do it. If it succeeds, if we get the government to do a referendum, and this applies a bit to what Alberta has, there's certain processes that will happen. It's not automatic Saskatchewan becomes independent. It could succeed, and then negotiation happens with Ottawa, and we get everything we ask for, and then we still stay within Canada. Ottawa couldn't legally ignore the results, but they also aren't required to accept full independence unconditionally. Constitutional talk would begin. Saskatchewan and Canada would enter a negotiation phase to decide distribution of assets, debt, division of power, responsibility. I know this is super dry information, but this is something that's important for you guys to know, because when the NDP screams, if the referendum happens, Saskatchewan is over, actually no, if we win a yes in the referendum, we would be situated in the best position to be able to negotiate with Ottawa for actually staying in Canada. So most people don't even know that. So when the NDP screams, oh, it would destroy Canada, actually it would probably force Ottawa to do exactly what we want. And just look at Quebec. Even if it didn't succeed, look at the huge gains and success Quebec had. And imagine if Alberta, Saskatchewan, maybe rural Manitoba and rural BC, imagine if they do the same thing. It sends a strong message to Ottawa that we need rural representation in government. Major legal and political decisions follow. Saskatchewan would need to draft and ratify a provincial constitution, maybe one with a lot of bones that can't be shaken, maybe similar to the American Constitution. Decide on currency, passport, and federal service. This, I've seen APP saying you wouldn't necessarily lose your Canadian passport. It would be a negotiation. You could potentially get dual citizenship, or you might not. We might get another passport, but if you look at the latest one of basically Trudeau's life, I would rather have a new one or the old one back.
Yeah.
Handle federal pensions program and trade. These are all things that make people hesitant because they don't know what that would look like. And we don't know what that would look like. These are things that would be negotiated on. Ottawa would push back. It wouldn't shock me if they're pushing back right now to try to stop what we're doing. It wouldn't shock me if there was plants here to try to disrupt what we're doing. Indigenous issues must be addressed. Saskatchewan would need to negotiate directly with First Nations who have constitutional rights and may align with either province or federal framework. My next slide is on that specifically. And I've heard this narrative online. I've heard it come from the left. We've heard chiefs say, you can't even talk about separation or referendum because it can't happen because of our treaty. That's actually misinformation. There is legal framework that has already been put in place in 1998 when Quebec tried to do succession referendum, and they outline what would happen. So when you hear these lies, you can counter back with this information. So They get a chance at voting just like you and I. So it is an inclusive vote. We have to have good faith negotiations with First Nations people. And this is an avenue, even us as an organization, we want to take part in. So if you are a First Nation person from a First Nation community, we would love to have you join a part of our team so you can give us your perspective. And I have white words here. Let's not do to First Nations what Ottawa does to the West. First Nations are their own culture. They have their own set of ways that they live. So if we treat them indifferently, if we don't include them, if we don't consult them, we're basically essentially doing what Ottawa's done to us over the last 100 more years. So what would happen if a referendum won for First Nations people? They could choose the status quo. They could choose to stay a part of Canada, and every reserve would become a part of Canada within Saskatchewan. They could do treaty transfer. And these are all things they would choose, not us. It would be them. They could choose to give authority, or I guess not authority, that's the bad word, but Saskatchewan would assume the Canada's treaty responsibility instead of Ottawa. And with how Ottawa's been dealing with it, we hear about the complaints all the time. I don't think that would necessarily be a bad thing. So another thing, they could choose a totally brand new framework, totally brand new treaty that are negotiated not from a place of vulnerability and naivety, which was way back when they were done, but it would be negotiated from a place where they know what they want, they know who they are, and they know what place they might fit in a new nation. Personally, that's the part that I like. And also, full disclosure, I'm part Indigenous, so I can't say Métis. I'm part Indigenous from New Brunswick, so I'm part Micmac. So if I have Native features, because I am partly Native, so we'll see how media twists that. Kidding. Okay, sorry, media. I'm pretty hard on you guys. Every media joke, though, always gets a few laughs. Okay, so this is the part where we're going to take a break. If you have any questions, comments on everything that's said, suggestions, put it to this QR code. And then will come the really important part. Not Mitch yet. You're the most important part. But that will be the part that I want you to pay fully attention. So if you have to walk around the room, we'll start again in about 5 minutes. So is everyone refreshed? Yeah? Okay. This is probably going to be the information that's going to give you the most hope and the information that's going to be the most valuable out of this entire presentation. And it's information you wish you would have known earlier. So I'm going to ask a question. How many people have voted in a nomination race? Okay, we're a little bit weird. We're not like most of the population. We're a little bit more involved. But the general population, we probably had 25% here voted in the nomination race. The general population is about less than 1%. In democratic processes in Canada, you can vote in a number of different things. We're going to talk provincially right now because we're addressing provincial issues. If you vote in the provincial election, your vote is 1 out of 5,000. So you, on average, these are general numbers. It's different in every constituency. MLA nomination election. Some of you probably don't even know what that is. That's an election that occurs sometimes months before an election, sometimes years before an election. And it's the election that determines which candidate's going to be on the ballot for a specific party. So when people say our government doesn't reflect us, doesn't reflect the people, you're right. They reflect less than 1% of the people who show up at the nomination race. Usually, it's their family and friends. That's why when you see an MLA step down, usually the next person to run will be like a friend or a family. It's like an old boys club, not gender-wise, but if you know what I mean, it's like an old boys club because Canadians don't even know that this is something you can get involved with. We had a lot of hands here, but again, some of you probably went to our town hall last year, we taught about this. Now, there's other things you can do democratically if you own a party membership. Some of that is become a board member for a constituency. So each MLA has a board. That board is elected at an AGM for the party. So, for example, if I'm going to use Jamie out of Martinsville, she has an AGM, there's an election that occurs, and then they pick the board. What usually happens, the MLA will be going to their family and friends and say, hey, will you team up with me and come on my board, because I want friendly people on my board that like everything that I like. And then there'll be like 10, maybe 15 people show up, and they'll all have a list of who to elect, and they'll pick the president, vice president, treasurer, member person. But there's a position that they pick that's quite important, and that's delegate. Now, every party, every political party, it's a little bit different, but they do have this board. So right now, what I'm explaining to you is of the political party that's currently in government. So I'm essentially telling you how we, the people, can take back the government. So these elections are happening right now. So 10, 15 people, if you have 10, 15, with all the people in this room, if you're all in different areas of Saskatoon, you could take, I think, does anyone know how many constituencies are in Saskatoon?
31.
There's 61 in the province. I don't think there's 31 in Saskatoon. Oh. There might be 12. With the numbers that we have in this room, we could basically elect all the delegates that we want. Why is this important? Let's say Scott Moe says, I'm going to sign on with Carla Beck and we're going to make it so provincial government can't hold a referendum, or we're going to make it so the plebiscite is worth nothing. You need 36% of delegates, 50% of delegates to be able to boot out the leader of the party. You need 8, I think, or 10 to call a meeting, an AGM where you do a leadership review, and Scott Moe's gone. So when you think about those numbers, and I'm not saying let's get rid of Scott Moe, because what we could get to replace him right now could be worse. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, if you're willing to show up for one meeting a year, you guys, if the entire movement of that wants a referendum or sovereignty wanted to actually engage and show up, and I mean really show up, just go to this one meeting or potentially volunteer to be that delegate, we could essentially have forced the hand and have a referendum called by the provincial government. Now that's one avenue. The Sask government also has AGMs. A party is governed by the members. The members determine which direction the party goes at their AGM. Before that, members submit policy. So if you're part of that board, you can submit policy to be voted on at the AGM. I'm going to give you numbers so you understand how easy this would be. And this is not illegal. I'm not telling you to do something secret. This is the democratic processes that we have in Saskatchewan and in Canada. So at the Sask Party AGM, the last one, they had, I think, don't quote me on this, this was given to me by a reporter, so it could have been wrong, but it was no more than 700 people who showed up at the AGM. At that AGM, they do a leadership review. They say, are you happy with the current leader of your party? So with the numbers we have in this room and maybe a couple more town halls, we could essentially show up at the AGM this fall and boot out the current leader. We could also put party priority policy forward to get a referendum option. And all it takes is more than them. And to be honest, if we consider how many people were there and the percentage of Sask Party members, probably a lot of them are already for sovereignty in Saskatchewan. Now I'm going to give you an unconventional idea too. So the NDP leadership election, there was less than 100 people that voted for Carla Beck. At their AGM, there was less than 200 people there. It was so low attended that they had to use round tables. So if going and getting someone elected to Sask Party is too intimidating, it'd be much easier with the NDP. So I actually teased this to Carla Beck because she made a post a couple weeks ago. She said the only reason Scott Moe and Daniel Smith are listening to people who want sovereignty is because they're afraid to lose their job. I'm like, wait a minute, I can tell you how easy it would be for you to lose their job. How many people showed up at your AGM? No, but I'm teaching you this because it's reality. And you got to understand why we're in the mess we're in, why these parties have gone left and left and left and far left. The NDP used to be somewhat reasonable. Like, they were. If we're honest, they used to be somewhat reasonable. Now, activist organization, kind of like ours, but on the left, unions, know everything I've been teaching you. And they've been telling all of their people that, and all of their people have been showing up to these AGMs, showing up to these nominations, and elected the people that went along with their activist ideas. And then the reasonable people in there said, oh, I don't want any part of this, and they stopped getting involved. So that's why these parties have gone more and more to the left. Now, that hasn't necessarily happened to the right because we didn't know, but now we do. So now we can do something to actually change things. So just to give you another perspective, these are numbers. Sask Party has 27,125 members. If 34% of the province want sovereignty, that's like 400,000 people. There's more of us than there are of them. NDP has 7,297. We've had more people who have signed up to our website than they have members. We could essentially do that if that was something you guys wanted to do. Now, I will say though, when you sign up to a party, you have to, sometimes I have to agree with the values of the NDP. I don't know if I could stomach that, so I won't be able to do it because I have such core values that I can't do that. But I can tell you, if it got to a point where the NDP was the only government in power and they were taking all of our rights away, I would be willing to do that to defend my country. So, how many of you knew this information? A few hands. Do you guys see how easy for the people to actually get a government that represents them? Now, this would be a win-win for everyone. If we got more involved, what that would do, that would force the NDP to get more normal people involved and not just the activists. And then the NDP maybe at one point would have a leader that was willing to defend Saskatchewan. So I would love to have leaders of both parties that would be willing to do whatever it takes to defend the people in this province. Now, these are the parties that are currently in government. What could happen tomorrow, a big scandal could come out and the Sask Party could be involved in some human trafficking ring and it would come out and then no one would vote for the Sask Party and then we'd be looking at a different entity. So I'm not saying Sask Party is just the answer or the NDP is just the answer. It might get to a point where we get a completely new different party where the public is ready to elect a new party in. We saw that happen in BC. What I'm teaching you can apply to this new party too. It is nonpartisan. It's just how our democracy works. So, can you give me a thumbs up if you're following along, sort of, or is it too dry? Okay, most people. Okay. So I don't worry when they say, oh, we're not going to do a referendum, because I'm like, okay, see you in October at the AGM. We're going to make sure there's someone in there who's willing to do it. Reality. I'm going to preface this. These are the recent polls that have come out on the Western alienation, Western separatist sentiment in Saskatchewan. I'm going to first show you to the one on the left. They said the separatism was higher in 2019 than it is now. How many of you believe that? Okay, I wasn't a separatist in 2019 and I am now, and there's a whole bunch of us. I don't believe that. But look at the different style of polling. On the left, they asked a range of questions: strongly in favor, moderately in favor, moderately opposed, strongly opposed. If you add the moderately in favor and strongly in favor, it adds more than 50% of the population. Now, the recent polling, they didn't add those options. They just basically said yes or no if Carney wins the next election. So here, if Liberals forms the next government, it was 33%. There's been other polling that I've seen is 34%. But I also want to add another layer. It's really easy to lie with statistics.
Yes.
If you want to know how easy it is, I had a gentleman, Mark Mitchell. He does Rasmussen reports in the U.S. He's the #1 conservative pollster in the U.S. Trump quotes him all the time. He was the only one that was accurate about the election. While Kamala was showing that she was going on this big slide up, he had her showing constant the whole time. So he came on my show and explained how statistics can be manipulated. One of the ways, if you look in the fine print of the Angus Reid poll, they didn't poll the general public. They polled their online members that are subscribed to their forum. So it's not a direct reflection of the province. It can't possibly be. So it's not, most people don't sign up for Angus Reid's forum, only specific people. So we do want to hire someone to do one. I think you guys are doing that soon, so I'm not going to go too much details into it because he's going to hopefully you'll explain what you're doing. But we do want to do a poll. We estimate the cost of the poll would be around $2,500, maybe a little bit more. And someone said we should have had a better sound system. We didn't even have money in our bank account to book this hall. I had to basically take it out of my account, but then the funds came in, thankfully. But we work on very limited funds as an organization. It's funny, my husband was checking Reddit because we wanted to see if there was going to be organized counter-protests. So they were saying, oh, they must get huge American funding and all these big backers. I'm like, oh, that makes me feel like kind of good. I must be doing that great of a job that it looks like we have all this money backing us. No, I don't even get paid for what I do. Like, my childcare is not even covered. We have a few board members, and a lot of them are here today. We're all volunteers. No one gets paid. And we run a website, but like even that, I don't even have an IT person. Our website, it's me. I figured out how to make a website. but you wouldn't tell that. You couldn't tell because apparently based on the Reddit we're really, really rich and backed up by a lot of money, so it must look really great. But speaking of that, we'll have better speaker system next time. We've got a little bit of money that's come in the last week, not a lot. It like $3,000, maybe a little bit over. This hall rental was over $1,500, so all the town halls. Hey, I want to tell you something else. It's not on the slide. We had 8 town halls booked with the Legion all over the province. I don't know if you saw in the email. On Friday, they called us. So someone at head office in Central Command, I won't name a name because I don't want him targeted, basically decided to cancel all of our town halls that we booked with the Legion, even though we had contracts, we had already paid. Hopefully they'll refund us. But we're waiting for a call. They didn't even have the guts, I was going to say something else, the guts to call us and tell us. And the wording I was given is because we don't support separatism. So I'm like, you obviously don't support freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, everything our veterans have fought for. But I didn't tell him that because I didn't get to talk to them yet. But anyways, I will. I'm hoping they're going to call me on Monday and hopefully reverse. But it was a lot of work. We've got 15 town halls booked. 5 of them are still going ahead because they're not with the Legion. And 2 of them haven't canceled yet. They're pushing back to support us. So, which is, I don't know if it'll work, but it's just so you guys understand what we're up against. We don't have big backing, but maybe we will now. Not like big donors. I don't want to be bought either. So I'd rather it comes from everyday people than somebody that we've had people offer, we're going to give you $100,000, but there's strings attached. I'm like, no, we're not doing it. If there's any strings that comes attached to it, we don't want it. Reality, it's a little bit higher than that, maybe 100 more signatures. When I took this photo, it was this number. We don't have the numbers that Alberta got in the first week. We haven't been doing this for years like they have. They had like this whole structure all throughout the province. They have a lot more influencers than we do in Saskatchewan. For some reason, we don't have like a whole ton. So that's a nudge for you guys to become influencers. So we need more people to spread the word. And we want this to be over 100,000 signatures. And that goes with this. UG isn't leading this. If you think it is, we are going to fail. We're helping you give a place to all gather and organize, but you guys need to lead this movement in your community. We're hoping when you leave here, you decide to have a nice like potluck dinner and invite your friends over and have meetings in your home so you can get 10, 15, if your home's big enough, who cares? People would come. They don't mind being crammed. But have meetings in your home, have meetings in your community. How many people are here are not from Saskatoon? Oh, a whole bunch of you. See? With all these hands, that's like 100 town halls. So if we had 100 of you doing a small town hall in your own little community, we'd probably get like 100,000 people. So we've given you information, the presentation that we've got, where everyone's asking, we get a copy. You can take pictures. We're not secretly hiding this. Everything we're going to post publicly so that you guys can be equipped to do the same kind of information in your own home. Again, if you think we're going to be the only ones to do meetings, it will fail. It needs to be a grassroots from the ground up. It's funny, too, because it's like the Lord knew what was coming, because when Unified Grassroots was founded, we were looking for a name for our organization, and I prayed to the Lord, and he said Grassroots. We didn't even know we'd be doing this. But, so that's praise God. It's like he knew ahead of time what was coming. What can you do? Contact your MLA, even if they're NDP. Ask them, why aren't you defending sovereignty? Why aren't you defending a referendum? Because if you defended a referendum, we would be in the best negotiating position with Ottawa to get rights as a province, to get our sovereignty, to get respect, to get the things that harm us. Why aren't you defending that? So you can also contact your Sask Party MLA and say, ask him if he's a separatist. We don't know who all is. I know media is here probably asking, who's in your back pocket? As if like we do some secret stuff. We don't. We just do these town halls. Some of these people decided to run. I don't even know who all did. So I don't even know how many of them are UG fans. I imagine a lot of them, but not the NDP. They're really not fans. They've done like 4 press conferences about our organization in the last 4 weeks. I do plan on sending Carla Beck some flowers and a thank you card because it's been amazing advertisement. So, and I will say when I tell them, maybe we'll show up at your AGM. You can't say we're in bed with the Sask Party when we might show up to your party. Now, how are they going to know at their AGM, at their nomination meeting, how many of their people might be UG members? Yeah. We'll never know. That's going to irritate them. But anyways, join the board of your MLA. Find someone who's willing to join the board. Show up and vote at that board meeting. They're all happening right now. If you look up at the NDP party website, they usually post them there. The Sask Party is posting there. Jody, are you here? Jody? Yes. Okay, there. How many are scheduled right now for the Sask Party over the next little while? 3 or 4. Are they mostly in Saskatoon? Okay. Okay, so she's saying there's 3 or 4. There's going to be 61 per year. So some have already gone by. We've kind of lost our chance, but there's always next year. They happen every year. Push for citizen-led binding referendum. I also want to say, if tonight, I think maybe 300-400 people are here. I don't know how many people. If someone wants to count 200, okay, 200 people are here. If 200 memberships were to be sold today, I can tell you Scott Moe will start stressing. If 200 membership or RSVPs to the AGM showed up, I can tell you they're going to start stressing. When they start advertising their AGM, we need to do what Alberta did. Alberta, what was your numbers before people got involved with attendance at the UCP AGM?
We went from 700 to 1,700 to 3,400
okay.
to 6,500
okay.
in successive years.
700 to 1,700 to 3,400 to 6,500.
I will address that.
Okay, he's going to talk about that. So Sask Party had about 650, less than 700. So it'd be nice to show up at the convention or the AGM, whatever you want to call it. I think it's convention mostly. And tell Scott Moe how we really think. So raise your voice. Okay, push for citizen-led binding referendum. Raise your voice peacefully, legally, and everywhere. When you see UG getting attacked in the media, bad articles written about us, correct the record. We're going to be doing press release to counter the narrative and the lies constantly. Go on our website, look. If they're attacking us, lying about us, we're probably done a press release. If they're lying about the narrative of a referendum, if they're lying about the narrative of sovereignty, counter that narrative. This is something we actually worked on as an organization during COVID. When our organization was being attacked, we had 300 people ready to counter back the narrative and address the lies, and it was super effective. They stopped lying about us. They actually stopped talking about us, so maybe we don't want that. Because it's free advertising, right? So, but we do want to counter the narrative. The same way the Legion got misled about what this presentation was about, which is essentially a democratic education presentation, which that would be something the Legion should support. The general public is being misled too. Join the movement, sign up for our petition. All of this is options on our website, unifiedgrassroots.com. Volunteer, donate, help gather names. If everyone in this room was to get 3 people to sign up, we'd have 600 more signatures. I think you know more than 3. Let's say you know 10 people. That's 2,000 more signatures. Things we will do. We've got 17 more town halls after this. Compile all the feedback. Okay, so that QR code that I gave you guys, one of the things we want to do is compile all the feedback we get from our town halls and do a big report. And we want to submit that to the Saskatchewan government. And we're going to demand them to respond back to the report. So this is what the people told us at these events. This is their concerns. This is what they want you to do. And we're going to ask them to respond back. We don't know if they will, but I guess that might motivate us to attend an AGM in the fall. Who knows? So we're going to try to equip you with information to change minds. So we didn't go into the hard questions today. To be honest, I'm not equipped to go into them. What would pension look like? What would healthcare look like? And I won't know. What I tell you could be completely different to what reality will be at the time. But we will try to help equip you with how to have a productive conversation with people who might not be on the same page with you. So that's something we want to prepare as an organization to equip you with. And we're going to do it from a mindset, too, of someone who might think differently so that that conversation can go better. We want to do a province-wide public opinion poll. Again, that's $2,500, if not more, because we don't think the numbers that are being portrayed in the media are accurate based on everything we know and we've seen. We want to, and it's not us that's going to be doing it. We're going to commission a company that does have a lot of credibility, but we're going to give them specific criterias that we want. It'd be great if Mark Mitchell with Rasmussen Polling could do it, but that would cost more because he'd need the Canadian data. But I would trust his report. Prepare and send. Okay, maybe the public wouldn't because it'd be an American, so they might go to 51st state. So maybe we'll forget that. We'll get a Canadian company to do it. We're already being accused of having big funders in the U.S., so we don't want to feed that. Prepare and send a full Saskatchewan mail out. A lot of people don't know there's a movement building that exists, and they feel just like us. In fact, probably 34% of the province, that's 400,000 people. If we had them all in our organization, well, the plebiscite would be really easy, even if Carla Beck tries to double it. So we want to reach the people by a mail out. So usually not an envelope, that's really expensive, but we can get like a flyer added into mailbox, and it would cost about $15,000 to do that. So that would get into every household in Saskatchewan. So that's something we would like to do, but again, we need the funding to do that. Keep growing this movement, town by town, home by home. Okay, this is the part that I don't like, but I know is so necessary. And we need money to do this. And like I said, our board, none of us gets paid. We don't have childcare covered. We do have rental hall. At least I'm not paying for this one. But we need money if we're going to succeed in this. We want to do more town halls, provincial-wide polling. And I'm not asking you for money for myself. I'm asking you for money for yourself, for your province. If you want to see this change and you think, honestly think it's the right direction forward, tell us that with your funds, because we'll be able to do a lot more. Like even if everyone in this room just gave $1, it would still go further than nothing. We want to hear from you. This is the QR code again. You're like, oh, she keeps throwing it at us, because I don't want you to think we don't want to hear from you. We do. This is the best way to do that. You can take a screenshot and even go later on when you're home. We want to know these answers. This is just ideas. You can message us and say, Nadine, your presentation totally sucked. I didn't like it. I'll take that. I'll ask you, how can I improve it? But why did you come here? We want to know where you are in your walk with sovereignty. We want to know, kind of have a gauge of, do people want the 51st state? Do people want their own sovereign nation? I will tell you my position. I don't want to go from Ottawa controlling us to DC controlling us, but that's my position. I'm not saying yours will be the same. I do want a better relationship with the US, and I don't think Ottawa is helping in that. I think we probably would have a really great relationship with the US. We've had in the past, and Ottawa interfered in that too. Way back when. I wasn't alive then, but what do you see as the best way forward? What resources would you like to feel equipped? What questions do you want answered? And any question you have today, we're going to do a Q&A after Mitch is done talking, and send the question to there. I'm going to look through. And if you don't have question, I didn't come prepared with any, so you're going to put me in a really bad spot. So please send some questions in. Or Mitch maybe will ask some or have some ideas. And what concerns do you have about sovereignty? Maybe you don't like this idea. Maybe you came here because you hate what we're doing and you have all of these concerns and fears. We want to hear about them. I want to know what's making you not want Saskatchewan to be freer. So I think that's it. That's it. Okay, we're going to take another 5-minute break, and then Mitch Sylvestre from APP, an organization we can probably learn a lot from, will be speaking next. Oh, also, sorry. We were going to have coffee, but like I said, we didn't have a big budget, and it was like $400 for coffee. So we don't have coffee, so I'm really sorry. We tried, since we got funds, we asked them yesterday if we could get coffee. They're like, no, it's too late. I'm like, it's all good. Okay, sorry. I'm just saying sorry. Back to your chair, a lady gave me a good idea. If you really hate QR codes and you want to write your question, we got paper. So, yay. So if you want a piece of paper, lift your hand, and I'm going to go hand it to you. And just so you know, all your information that you've given to us, the only people that see it is me and a couple other people on our board. It's very secure. It's with Nation Builder. This is what all political parties use. Nobody at Nation Builder gets it. It's just us. So the reason we ask for that is you can be here today, but then you might not hear about the next meeting or if something's happening in your area. And the only way we're going to succeed is if we have a way of getting a hold of you. So phone number, text, we're starting to use text. It costs more money, but usually text is super responded a lot. It's also a lot of work. Some of you may have received a text from me. It's not my personal cell. Some of you might have it, but it was a lot of response back and forth. So we're probably going to use email. So if you see UG, don't block us. Put us in the important folder, and then you'll get the next email. So I'm going to go pass this on, and I'm going to get Mitch to come next. Give a round of applause for Mitch.
Well, thank you very much. So I'm going to support everything Nadine said, just about every bit of it. So as far as I'm concerned, she had the misfortune of having to learn this all by herself. I, however, had a mentor, and that made a huge difference. That saved us years. So I'll get into that in a minute. First thing we'll do, we'll start with this.
The die is set, but Alberta ain't ready to kneel just yet. They chose their king, their power was met, but we don't answer to Ottawa yet. No crown gave us what we've earned, just dirt and fire and lessons learned. Now the ground it shakes, the steel it groans, and Alberta walks alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through frost. We ain't the last, we're the line they lost. Alberta stands, never on its knees. A nation born in the forge of the free. From the rigs to the rails, the crops to the code, we lit their streets, we bore their load. They laughed at pride, they mocked the West, but freedom don't die, it just waits for the test. The cowboys ride,
Yeah, you guys are actually the first people to see that. We haven't used that yet. All right, so I'm just going to start with the end. Here we are. Do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? That is the question that I brought to Elections Alberta on Friday afternoon, so we filed a petition. Okay, so I just want to back up a little bit and go to 6 weeks ago when I wasn't a full-blown separatist. That's how recent that's happened, and I've been the head of the APP for months. I'm CEO there. I've been CEO there for 4, 5, 6 months. When I came to the APP, I'd actually come from Alberta First Pension, and I was running the pension because we thought that that was one of the pillars or one of the things that we needed to do. Nadine referenced the white paper. Well, we have a firewall letter that was written by Stephen Harper years ago, and it has all those things in it. Exactly what is in that white paper for Saskatchewan. Now, our Premier wants to do that again, but as far as I'm concerned, that's just delay. Like, government is not our friend. We have to understand also that government will not save us. It took me 3 years to figure that out, and I just learned it again. Right? I had high hopes for Poilievre. I thought he was going to win. That was going to make my life immensely easier. I wasn't going to have to be at town hall after town hall after town hall pushing this, because he was going to build pipelines and he was going to do some stuff that was going to help us. Right now, in the Premier's address to the people of Alberta, right after Carney won, I think she used the word freedoms 6 or 8 or 10 times in the first 3 minutes. I had her for a dinner in Bonnyville a week ago Thursday, a Premier's dinner. It's her third Premier's dinner that she comes to Bonnyville in the last 26 months. I had 800 people in the room at $250 a seat, and I had the opportunity to do a chat with her, a fireside chat with her, and I asked her to explain if Ottawa is actually abusing Alberta. And we're going to get into this, but she absolutely agrees that Ottawa is abusing Alberta, and what she did was she wrote down a list of demands for Mr. Carney and said, if we don't get this, it's going to affect national unity. So what does that do? That puts us on the road for national unity. Before that, we were focused on pension. We weren't focused on national unity. But she set us on this path by actually saying that. So what happened at that point is that we got organized with Alberta Prosperity. Now, Alberta Prosperity, the name is exactly what we're talking about here. This whole conversation, whether you want to believe it or not, is about money. There's also a little bit of Canadian pride and all that kind of stuff going on, but please understand, I'm old enough to remember when Canada was a much better place.
Yeah.
We do not live in the same country that I grew up in. Just for example, when I left high school, kids in my class graduated from school and could afford to buy a house. It wasn't even an unusual thing. Like, it was something that happened quite frequently. Nobody went, oh my God, you can afford to buy a house. No, that wasn't the deal. The deal was, it was expected that when you went to work, you could earn enough money to buy yourself a home. That's not the case today. And I'm going to share something with you. The system is working exactly the way they want it to work. That is not an accident. So as long as you put your brain around that, everything becomes clear very quickly. People have to be the face of this movement. People say, who's the head of the Alberta independence movement? Well, I'm the head of the APP, but I'm not running up there and putting my face on it. Do you know why? Because I want the people to understand that they're the face of it. Because I don't want to be the face of it. Because if you're not the face of it, it won't happen. So I'll explain to you all about the stuff that Nadine talked about with CA boards and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to share some big, big wins with you so you understand how really true that is and how that works. All right, so that's me. I'm the head of the UCPCA in Bonnyville. This all happened, so it started, I had a lady come into my store, I own a sporting goods store, and she said to me, Mitch, I'd like to talk to you. Now just understand, 3.5 years ago, I didn't know the left from the right. I'd never participated in anything politically, so I totally understand where you are. I was as apathetic as you can get. I had raised 5 kids. I coached hockey for 20 years, played hockey, all manner of stuff. I was busy. I was running my own store. I didn't have time for politics. And then COVID happened. And then they shut my store down. And 20 minutes down the road, Canadian Tire and Walmart were open. So I couldn't understand that. So I said, you know what? Started doing some research and doing all manner of things. So it turned out that through COVID, if you were a bicycle repair shop, and we weren't talking winter now, you could stay open. So I used that leverage and I opened my door. And AHS came to the door and they said, you can't do that, we're going to shut you down. I said, no, you're not going to shut me down. Get the hell out of my store, I'm a bike repair shop. The lady says to me, well, it's January. I said, I can fix bikes in January. So away we went. So that was the beginning of the journey. So then very shortly after that, she says to me, Mitch, come to a meeting. I said, I want to come to a meeting. I don't want to have anything to do with it. She said, come to a meeting. So I went to a meeting, and sure enough, they said, Mitch, come and visit with us. We're going to have a house meeting at our house. So 6 of us went to a house meeting. So this is how this has started. So this is exactly what she's telling you, and it's exactly my path. So that's why I was kind of giggling through that entire presentation. If you don't believe that works, just wait. I'll explain to you what we accomplished. So 6 of us were meeting in a house, and then other people during COVID were lonesome. Do you remember how that was? People were all by themselves, and they were scared. They couldn't go out of the house. And I was on my way to this meeting, and I looked up, and you could see that kind of the smoke was flat, so you know how cold it was. I was driving downtown Bonnyville during lockdowns. My tires were square, all the rest of it, and I was nervous. And I couldn't understand why I was nervous. Well, I was going to a meeting during lockdown, and I said, well, what the hell's wrong with this? Why am I nervous? Why should I be nervous about attending a meeting in Bonnyville? Because they told us that they were going to lock us down. So I went to this meeting, and then after I got done all that, we ended up with that house meeting with the 6 people, and then we started meeting regularly. So people started to reach out to us, and they said, hey, can we come to these house meetings? And I didn't want anybody else at those meetings, but the girls, there was 3 girls and 3 guys in there, and I said, no, you know what? I just like this. I'm comfortable with this. I don't want any more people involved. Anyways, they finally talked me into it. So also remember, lockdown is happening, so we found a shop, a big heavy equipment shop, out by Cold Lake, out in the boonies, like literally out in the bush. So we called this meeting, and 400 people showed up. Wow. That was the beginning of my group that I have today. So then we went forward to that, and I had organized street rallies. Now you got to know me. That's not me, right? I'm not that guy that's going to carry a sign, walking down Main Street, Bonnyville, slamming anything. That wasn't going to happen. But it had to happen. So I was really uncomfortable. Now just remember, I was in a town of 10,000 people. Everybody knows me. My business is 50th and 50th, right in the heart of town. I coach most of the kids in hockey, all the rest of that kind of stuff. And I'm carrying a sign down there protesting what the government's doing with lockdowns and mandatory vaccines and all the rest of it, at a time where 75% of the people were thinking that they wanted us fringe minorities with unacceptable views to go away. And I was concerned that they were not going to shop at my store anymore, because it was legitimate concern, right? So then that didn't happen. Actually, to tell you the honest to God truth, what happened was people came up to me and said, thank you very much for doing that. We really appreciate it, because we didn't have the courage to do it. And now if you're leading and there's 500 or 600 people behind us, then we're not as obvious as we would be if that wasn't the case. So we had many, many of these rallies. I organized a meeting like this once a month for the last 3 years in Bonnyville. Some of those meetings had 700-800 people at them. And understand, Bonnyville's got 7,000 people in it. So we had literally 10% of the population come to our meetings. But it didn't take me long to understand that while we were doing all this, we were talking to each other. Right? We're not talking to anybody else. If we're going to have influence, we had to get involved with government, because government is where all the decisions are made. So I stood in front of a group like this, having realized that, and I said to the group, I said, we have to fire Jason Kenney and put our people on the provincial board without knowing how we were going to do that. So I stood in front of the whole group and I said to them, this is what I was going to do. So now I have a problem. Next morning I go to work and I said it, so how the hell is this going to happen? Right? Never has a sitting premier ever been fired in Canada. Okay? So we said we were going to do that. So 2 days later, my phone rings. A gentleman by the name of David Parker calls me from Take Back Alberta, and he said, I hear you want to fire Jason Kenney, so do I. And I hear you have a big group of people in Bonnyville and we need your help. So we went to work on firing Jason Kenney. So Bonnyville bought 1,700 $100 memberships to go to Red Deer to vote to fire Jason Kenney. Okay? Now, in the middle of all that, our MLA came to see me, and because he heard that we were doing this, and he came and sat in my office, and I didn't trust politicians at that point at all. And he said, Mitch, we got to fire Jason Kenney. I said, you know what I asked him? First question. Where the hell have you been for a year and a half? Literally. I said, people are marching on the street, and they're mad about everything, and you're non-existent. Where were you? And now you want my help. So I had him talk to me. I have a very good friend who's a preacher, and he's helped me throughout this whole journey. So I called him up. I said, Trevor, come and sit. Let's listen to this guy. So he told us what they were doing. The entire caucus would pass something on Friday. Kenney would come back in on Monday and nix it, like to reopen the province. And he did it several times. So he told me that. He left the office. I said to Trevor, do you believe him? Trevor says, yes, I believe him. So then I had him come back 2 more times, and I brought 12 to 15 people upstairs into the store. What I call it the crow's nest. And right out of those 12 to 15 people, those are the people that are on my CA board today, still there today, and we're the biggest, best CA board in Alberta. So just telling you that. So as a consequence to that, away we went. Did you remember they cheated? Oh, you guys are from Saskatchewan, you might not remember, but they cheated. They changed the rules like a week before this vote. So then we decided that we were going to lie to them when they phoned us, and we told them that we were going to support Jason Kenney. So they went into the vote thinking they had 70% support. We beat them. Mr. Kenney was fired, and away we went from there. All right. Those are my people at the AGM last year. That's a 6-hour drive from Bonnyville, a 4-hour drive from Bonnyville. There I am. There's the Premier. She supported us in all of that. She comes to Bonnyville for that dinner I just explained to you the other day, and I asked her all manner of hard questions. But she was really angry with me right there. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we thought after COVID that Alberta needed a new Bill of Rights. And so my CA board put a motion to the provincial AGM that we needed a new Bill of Rights for Alberta so that we could enforce our rights. Informed consent was on there, all manner of other stuff.
Excuse me, what is a CA board?
Constituency Association Board. So Nadine was talking about that here. So Bonnyville has 87 constituency associations. Every one of those has an MLA. So that's who runs the province. And what most people don't understand, and what she's sharing with you, and neither did I at the time, is that these CA boards are very powerful. So she asked me how many people came. Our first AGM, when we decided that we were going to, after we fired Jason Kenney, we decided that we were going to put our people, democratically elect them, on the board. So there was 8 seats up every second year. So we brought our people, and we won all 8 seats that year. And the next year, we won the other 8. So how did that happen? The year before, they had 700 people. So we took 1,700 of our people to the AGM. And they weren't expecting that, the UCP. Now, those are our guys, right? The UCP, that's our people. Jason Kenney busted in a bunch of immigrants the year before when he was Premier to take over the entire CA boards. So we thought that, we would do the same thing, except we just bring hardworking, regular Albertans over there to do the same thing. So they did that. So this gets even more interesting because Don Braid from the Calgary Herald, who's always writing articles about us, says to me after the first AGM, he says, I don't believe that that represents the UCP party. I said, Don, there was 1,700 people here. He says, well, there's twice as many as last year. So this gets better. So the next year, when we got the other 8 people on the board, we brought 3,400 people. Okay? So every one of those premier's dinners that I have, that I give $250 a seat, last year I spent $40,000 of that money to get our people to the AGM. I bussed them, 3 buses. We paid half of their way, bussed them there, bussed them back, and bought them pizza and beer on the way home. Oh no, pizza and pop. So the following year, last year now, there was an SGM. So the premier was up. So I worked very hard to get people there. So we had 6,500 people there last year. The largest political convention in the history of Canada last year was the AGM. So just understand how big a deal that is. All right, so this is what's at stake, ladies and gentlemen, and there's the path to fixing it. I was CA President of the Year for the province 2 years ago, and we continue to work very hard, but now we're at the point where government is very not happy with us because we're too strong. So they're trying to get us out of there. They're literally raising money to get us out of there. That's how much they don't like the fact that we influence them. This is what I know of government, and they say it all the time. You've elected us, we're going to make the decisions. Total nonsense. We've turned the pyramid upside down in my CA. Our MLA comes to board meetings. Our MLA is there talking to us all the time. I have regular conversation with our MLA, and that's the relationship that you need to have with your government people. They have to work for you, not the other way around. Okay, so I'm going to reinforce a lot of what Nadine said today because she's absolutely, totally on point with everything. What's at stake? Your sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty is your ability to control your own area. It's as simple as that. I believe, without a doubt, that our government is so corrupt that if we got all the money that they were taking from us, that we wouldn't understand how rich we are. And I am going to show you many examples of that coming up. Well, I'm not guessing here. I would never say that. I've never had anybody call me and say, hey, you can't say that. None of that's true. We're going to sue you. I've been doing this as about my 100th town hall. So just so you understand, I've got town halls booked for 10 in the next 11 nights. So we're after this. So just understand this. This can be done. So what's at stake? All manner of wealth and everything else. That path of referendum in Alberta, not going to affect you. This does affect you, however. Just understand this. From my perspective, as somebody that's lived here my whole life that would never believe that we actually had a prime minister or a leader that could say that we had no core identity and consequently we're a post-national state. A post-national state is a state with basically no borders, uncontrolled immigration. And does he mean that? Does he mean that? Has he been living that out? Has he been showing us that he has no respect for who we are? Yep. And Nadine said she's got these identifying factors of what Saskatchewan or Saskatchewan people are. And I'm going to tell you something. The highest GDP per person in Canada is Alberta, and the next is Saskatchewan. So why? I spent 80 town halls doing Alberta pension, so I understand pension very clear. By the way, you will get your pension. It's the same for anywhere you live in Canada. You will keep your passport and you will get your pension, and I'm going to tell you why. Because you can be a Canadian citizen, you can be an American citizen, you can be a British citizen, you can have all those passports. Carney has about 8 of them. So you just understand if it's good for him, it's good for you. Yeah. So you can become a citizen of Saskatchewan and a citizen of Canada, and you can still retain your citizenship. Canada does not take citizenship away from its people. So just understand that. Step 1. You will remain a Canadian citizen. All right, here's where the problem starts. Clifford Sifton said this: every Canadian desires that the great trade of the prairies, that means you, shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up factories and workshops of Eastern Canada and contribute in every way to its prosperity. That is still the case today. That's 1905. 1904, sorry. I'm just going to tell you what. My grandparents came here in the early 1900s, and they broke the land by hand. They left everything behind. They moved here for a brighter future. So parallel that to today. I really believe that you're as well off right now as you will ever be. It's going to go downhill from here. And if you don't believe it, just pay attention to the policies that they're putting forward. We're policy locked. These people are going to hurt us, and they're telling us that they're going to hurt us. That's the whole problem. We have to believe them. So somebody called me a traitor for not for talking about this. Well, 6 weeks ago, I didn't even think about leaving Canada. But now I see that there is absolutely no way. 90% of the Senate is Liberal, most of the judges, and there's absolutely, in my mind, no way out. You remember this? I do, very clearly. Screw the West, we'll take the rest. And I remember them saying it, and I couldn't believe it at the time. So here's the thing. Mark Lalonde admitted at that time that it was designed to stop Alberta from becoming an economic power. And guess when transfer payments started? Right there. So what was the point of the transfer payments? To weaken the West and strengthen the East, right? Just understand that. It's a very simple equation. All right, here we go. All right, that's Alberta's net contribution. That hasn't got as much to do with you guys in the last 15 years, so I'll just skip by that. There's equalization payments. You see how much Saskatchewan is getting? Right there, that's 25, 26. Pay attention to Quebec at 13.6 billion. Now, Quebec's not a have-not province, right? We're not going to pretend that Quebec's a have-not province. Here's the difference. We work harder than them, so we have more money. But we have more money because we work harder than them. I'm going to say that again. We work harder than them. And because we work harder doesn't mean that they're entitled to our money. That doesn't make any sense. That's not the Canadian way. That's not the way that we do things in this country. If you work hard, you get rewarded for that. And if you think that's a mistake, there's the year before. How much different is it? That is exactly the same way it is every year. 0 for Alberta, 0 for Saskatchewan, 13.3 billion for Quebec. So just understand Quebec has $26 billion in revenue come to them in a 13-month period. So what's the budget of the province of Alberta? $75 billion, and we're $100 billion in debt. But yet, we're paying these guys $13.3 billion a year. Canada pension. Okay, let's go into pension. I'll explain to you how pension works. And I kind of did anyway. Here's the thing. There's a portability clause in your pension. You can live in Costa Rica, you can live in Panama, you can live in the United States, you can live anywhere you get your pension. That includes Alberta and Saskatchewan after the referendum. Okay? That's the way it works. Every pension in the world has a portability clause. Every single one. Now, in Alberta's case, here's what's happened. Alberta pays $9 billion a year to CPP. They collect $6 every year. They have a $3 billion annual overage. Now, back in the day, Ontario decided that they didn't want to be the guys carrying the load for the rest of the country, so they wanted to know, and they put it in the Act, that if they paid more, it would go in a fund for them that they could call back any time they want, okay, with interest. Okay? Alberta's share of that, based on that formula, today, is about $360 billion. However, is there anybody in the room that believes that that pension fund may not be there? Because we don't know. They never audit it. We don't even know where it's invested. It could be all underwater, for all we know. And I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that it could be. And I saw live my premier say, bringing this pension plan back to Alberta is a no-brainer. That was until the CPC started talking to them. The Conservative Party of Canada said, and then she said, well, we don't want to hurt Pierre Poilievre's chances of being elected by bringing that back. Now, that $360 billion is an asset in the government of Canada's books. However, that's not correct. That should be an asset in the province of Alberta's books, correct? Because it's our money. But they've missed 4 deadlines to tell us how much of that number they're going to give us. And the smallest number I've ever heard is $190 billion. All right, so just so you guys are clear, we're going to go over the mess that we've had happen to us in the last 10 years. Oil continues to be in high demand. The demand for oil is going up every year. Alberta's lost, here we go, we'll go here, $500 billion. $500 billion. Just understand how much money $500 billion is. Not only is $500 billion a lot of money, but I'm going to tell you what else it is. I've run a business both ways, with money and without money, and I'm going to tell you it's way better to run it with money. And the reason for that is because you can expand, you can grow, you can hire more people, you can take chances, you can do all manner of stuff. They're not interested in that for us. They're actually working very hard to shrink our economy. That's why they've got production caps, carbon tax, and federal red tape. They also don't believe that we should sell our natural gas to Germany, Japan, and all those countries, even though they come begging for it. They come to Alberta begging for us to sell them natural gas. They burn off natural gas. Saskatchewan's in the same position. It's cost us $1.3 or $1.4 trillion is what that's going to cost us. But what does that really do? That hurts our kids because they won't have the opportunity to get those high-paying jobs. Their sovereignty gets affected. Their ability to earn gets affected. And what happens if they can't earn money? Then they haven't got enough leeway to have a family or a bigger family. That's all part of it. That's all part of the equation. What do I hear from kids? I had 5 of them. I raised 5 kids. I talk to them all the time. They said, well, you know, I have kids, but I'm not sure I can afford that. I've got a daughter who's a lawyer in downtown Calgary. She's 29 years old. She just moved into her own apartment now, just recently, within the last couple of weeks, and she's earning good money. The fact that the federal government is not only trying to shut our industry down, which is what they're doing, I'll get to the rest of that later, they want to put a cap on it. So what does a production cap do? The Premier said it's going to cut production in half. What does that mean for you and me? That means that our kids won't have jobs. That means it's going to cut our economy in half. So the government is not only trying to stop it, they're trying to kill it. And it gets worse. Here's the harms. Blocking pipelines, tanker ban, blocks oil and gas investment, carbon tax. Carbon tax Saskatchewan did a great thing on that. C-293. Is anybody a farmer in the room? Okay, so understand this. They said at the AGM, our agricultural minister said, the federal government does not know what they're doing. They can't put this in. They don't know what they're doing. We're going to put the Sovereignty Act on them if they do this. So this is what they're doing. They're passing a bill that is going to say that they will be able to, in the case of an emergency, which is whatever they choose that emergency to be, they'll be able to come to your farm and seize your land and your herd. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Why would they do that? In my mind, that's unimaginable, that they actually think that they could do this. It's pretty depressing, isn't it? Like, I mean, really, it's really depressing. And never in my lifetime would I have thought that the federal government would be attacking our biggest industries and our ability to create wealth, because that's what they're doing. And they understand that they're doing it. And this is why. Because it's all about green. It's all about CO2. Now, I'm a biology major at the U of A. I understand the carbon cycle. CO2 is a gas of life. There's no question about it. Without CO2, nothing works. We exhale CO2 right now. So, the carbon taxes cost Canadians billions of dollars over 5 years, hurting the economy while reducing CO2 emissions by 11.9 gigatons. China emits 11.9 gigatons of CO2 every day and a half. So what are we doing? We're shutting our whole economy down, and they're importing our coal, and they're burning all that every day and a half. Taxing people into poverty is not going to change the weather, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely not. Now here's one of my best slides. Not only are they killing industry, not only are they going to cap it, they're going to tax the hell out of you so you can't afford to eat. Now let's go through the list. carbon tax, personal income tax, corporate income tax, goods and services tax, excise tax, fuel excise tax, alcohol excise tax, tobacco excise tax, cannabis excise tax, excise duties, custom duties, air travel tax, luxury tax, provincial tax, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, media tax, regulation tax, CPP tax, business tax, estate tax, and they want to tax your house if it's paid for. Okay. That is the definition of government overreach.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. An independent Saskatchewan and an independent Alberta, based on taking all those federal taxes out of there, is going to save you 15 to 20% real money every year. So if you earn $75,000 a year, you will have $15,000 more to spend every year than just by getting rid of those guys. So if you're making 100, that'll be $20,000. We've run it through AI, we've run it through all over the place. Those are the numbers. And we're talking about a 10% flat tax all the way across the board. So just understand, like, you're not doing anything different. What that means to the farm, first of all, take all that carbon tax and all that tax off the fuel. What that means to every one of you and your kids, that they're going to have $15,000 to $20,000 based on a $70,000 to $100,000 income in real money to spend. And they're not going to have to pay all those taxes on the money that they're spending. It's going to be life-altering. But you can choose it, and this is the choice. Give it to them or save it for you. And basically, that's the choice. That's what we're talking about here. That's basically sums it up. And here's what they're doing with it. And an audit for $187 billion worth of liberal infrastructure spending finds 20,000 missing projects. ArriveCan, a $60,000 app that cost $1 billion. We Charity, doing this very thing, $980 million. It goes on and on and on. They printed $350 billion during COVID with no audit. This is audited. Can you imagine what happened where there's no audit? All right, and here's the rest of it. They broke Parliament 150 days without being in government. So what's happening today? They're still not there. They took a summer break. They've been off for 6 months, and now they need a break for the summer. Do you know why? Because they don't want to do a budget. Do you know why? Because it's that bad. And they're also spending $40 to $70 billion without any discussion or without any democratic process. And I'm going to share with you. You would go to jail for stealing the money, and they're not going to jail for stealing the money, so they're above the law. So I'm going to ask you a question. Do you believe we live in a democracy if our politicians are above the law? And that's the reality of this whole situation here. You know, I have a story for you. This is kind of not related, but it kind of is in a lot of ways. I told you I graduated from university in biology, and I got a job in the summer trapping black bears for them to tag them, radio collar them so we could track their movements, and then we did a population control thing on them as well. So what ended up happening was I went in the bush and I had a black bear trapped, caught in a leg snare, and then I thought that I had to process them, and I knew I had to process them, so I had my shirt off. So I just look around, make sure there's not any more bears around, and I get on my hands and knees and I start processing this bear. And the next thing I know, I felt something wet on my back. And I looked, and there was a black bear right there, standing right beside me. Like literally put his nose on my back. So I got up and I stepped over that bear, and I decided, well, I wasn't going to lay down and put my hand over my head. He was like right there. So I walked backwards, talking loud to this bear for 200, 250 yards. And then the trail went like this. I went this way, the bear went that way. But the moral of the story is there was a bear in the bush that I didn't see. Like it or not, that was a situation I was in, and I had to deal with it. So that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you guys right now. You could have rolled over and played dead, or you can get up and talk to that bear and say, well, you know, pretend that you're going to fight it, because there was no fighting that bear. It was a 200. I had to weigh these bears before I tranquilized them, so I had done a bunch of them by that point. I knew how big that bear was. That bear was about 275 pounds, a big cinnamon. Like, he was literally he walked about 4 inches away from my belly, like the whole way back to the thing. And you know what? Honestly, you have no control over that, but we have control over this. We have to absolutely decide what we're going to do. All right, we talked about this, the canola. They tax peas too, by the way, not just canola. All right, censorship. You don't know what you don't know. So, if they stop the flow of information to you, you don't know that. So did you ever think that you would live long enough to see censorship bills passed in Canada? Bill C-63, online harms, and online streaming, so that means they have to be careful. They're doing this, but they're not in session, right? Understand that. We already went through that. So there's no discussion over this. Oh, we'll get past the drugs and the meth. I'll just share a stat with you. More American boys and kids died last year from fentanyl overdoses and opioid overdoses than did in the last 75 years of their war campaigns, including Vietnam, including Korea, including all of that. 103,000 soldiers died in that period of time, and 110,000 American kids or American people died last year and the year before from opioid overdoses. So it's not just in Canada. It's everywhere. But the only way we can fight this is to fight it locally. We have to do this here. That's why every one of you is so important, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That's why you've got to participate in your democracy. That's why we can no longer take it for granted that this is going to work out, because it's obviously not going to work out, because listen to this. In Carney's book, it's called Values. Western society, he claims this. Carney claims that Western society is morally rotten and that it has been corrupted by capitalism, which has brought about a climate emergency. So the corruption is bringing about the climate emergency. Just understand that. This, he claims, requires rigid controls on personal freedoms. Just like they did during COVID. Industry and operating and corporate funds. Now, you cannot get money from everywhere if you run a gun store like I do. There's banks that won't lend us money, even though guns have been in my business for 47 years. Industry and corporate funding. Assets will be stranded. Used gasoline-powered cars will be unsaleable. Inefficient properties will be unrentable. What Carney ultimately wants is a technocratic dictatorship justified by climate alarmism. So that's what he said in his book. What do you think the odds are he means it?
Very high.
All right, we'll go by that. Okay, last points here. All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. I just want you to understand the difference between a communist society and a free society. Okay? There it is. All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns. That way, no guns can ever be used to command the party. And here's what the Americans say. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So do you see the difference? So what's happening here? Mr. Carney said he's coming for our guns. All right, last point here. 2 million immigrants a year is what's coming into this country. A year. Nothing wrong with immigrants. Nothing wrong with immigration. There's something wrong with uncontrolled immigration because it's hurting you. It's hurting your kids. They got no place to rent. The price of rents are going through the roof. Healthcare is compromised because these people are getting healthcare. Refugees are getting $80,000 to $90,000 a year from our government to stay in Canada, and we can't give our veterans anything extra. Okay, here's why we're doing what we're doing. If you really want to change, you got to threaten to leave and mean it. Look what Quebec did. Look what happened to them. They collect their own taxes. They got their own pension. They're getting $15 billion a year from us. No wonder they're voting Liberal. Right? If that was happening to us, I don't blame them for voting Liberal. And they still want out. But that's not the point. The point of it is this. They're getting a fair deal from Ottawa, and they get it every year. That's why Ontario won't vote against it either, because they're also getting a fair deal. They're abusing Alberta and Saskatchewan. So that's exactly what's happening. And you can dismiss that or not believe it if you like, but here's the other thing. Numbers is what we have. Money and power is what they have. There's a few of them and a lot of us. And I really believe that if they thought that they could actually put all that stuff through and get it all done right now, they would. The only reason they're not is because they're afraid of you. They're afraid of the 6,500 people we got to the AGM. They're afraid of you organizing. They're afraid of you knowing all this. And the thing of it is, though, unless you move, nothing's going to change. So, unfortunately, you've bought yourself a job, and the job is to earn yourself more money, which you can do, and save your democracy, which is also what you can do. And if you haven't suffered enough, ladies and gentlemen, it is your God-given right to suffer more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's so funny. We didn't coordinate at all, but it worked out really well.
Yes, I told you.
Yeah. So we had some stuff that were said twice, but it was the really important stuff. So we don't have a cash box, but we have a green bin. Ironic, it's green. If you guys want to give cash donations today, you can do so in that bin. If you haven't signed up for UG, most of you, when you came in, you probably gave your email address and your phone number. If you don't want us to email you, just let one of the girls know so we know to opt you out. But if you do, we'll add you to our list. And yeah, if you want to volunteer, if you want to host a town hall in your community, if you even want to just have like a meeting at home and you want resources, let us know. We'll see if we can provide you with something. We did give you guys all sheets too when you came in. If you didn't get one, there's some at the table. It gives you concrete things you can do when you go home. And I think that's it. Yeah, thank you for coming. Sorry I talked a little bit longer than